What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Nathan here with Win with Nathan. Guys, let's bring you another update. I know this isn't an update for most of you because I've talked about this over the last 4 years, but today let's talk about mortgage fraud. And the reason I want to bring up mortgage fraud is because if you're in the game, you see it every day, right? We talked about it. We talked about everything from mortgage fraud, from occupancy fraud, reverse occupancy fraud, everything under the sun. We've always discussed it. I've always said it's going to take one event that, catapults into something big. And recently, a lot of people are just now catching on to the fraud that's been going on in the non-QM space up in the Northeast. Now, we talked about this, a lot of people and I have talked about this maybe 3-4 weeks ago when it was inside knowledge that we knew this was coming up about all this fraud. And we got this from people we know inside the industry. And what cracks me up more than anything else, guys, is whether you're a big YouTube influencer, you're a mortgage coach, you're teaching investors or anything like that, no one's talking about this. One of the biggest Facebook groups out there about real estate, they keep trying to say everything is fraud, fraud's ruining the real estate market, this, that, and everything. They have yet to talk about this breaking story that came out on the 15th of July that's all over the news, right? So insiders that do servicing and people teach real estate, they want to use the word fraud a lot with like property taxes, like property taxes are illegal, all this stuff, because they're catering to their viewers to get more viewership. But the truth is, like, there is fraud out there, right? In the Smoky Mountains, let's talk about it. There's a lot of fraud. There's fraud from realtors, there's fraud from lenders, there's fraud from the investor. I know several times when I talk to a client, they say they're buying an investment property, they plan to truly use it as investment, write it off, blah, 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 they need all that stuff, and then they're like, I can only qualify for X. The realtor goes and says, hey, let me put you in touch with my other lender, tell them it's a second home loan, and you can qualify for more, it's less money down, better interest, all that stuff, right? That is occupancy fraud, mortgage fraud by the realtor, by the borrower, because their whole intention was to buy it as an investment, and they might never stay there. And a lot of times you hear CPAs, you hear coaches, you hear YouTube channels, TikTok, lenders, everyone say, don't worry, no one's ever going to catch you, right? In the last 3.5 years, I've had one loan I've had to deny that I pre-approved, and I pre-approved. And that loan was mortgage fraud. And that mortgage fraud was done by the realtor, the seller agent, because they put the house, an open house for rental before it even closed. Had to have the permission by the seller agent, by the builder. And then when we questioned them about it, they said they were taught that's a great way to find out what your home's worth if down the road you want to rent it by a coach. Yeah, guys, that's straight up occupancy fraud, right? And nothing ever happens to those people because more than likely they're just a small fraud. But this story that came out, it's New Jersey, right? And this fraud has to deal more with the investors. And so we see this a lot, right? You saw it. You see a year or two ago, a lot of brokers were committing fraud with people that couldn't afford a primary home. They would say, hey, buy with a DSCR loan, it's no doc, and live there easily, right? So that's why this fraud came out from Fannie Mae. It's a fraud alert, right? And I'll just read the first line. So Fannie Mae has identified a pattern of mortgage loan fraud involving mortgage broker and multiple limited liabilities targeting 2 to 4 unit family investment properties in New Jersey and neighboring states. It goes on to say the LLCs record deed transfer documents in approximately 60 to 100 days after the deed transfer. An individual associated with the LLC applies for a limited cash out refinance. Okay. Interesting. But the individual applying for the loan does not appear on title. The appraised value of the properties in the refinance transaction are overestimated, allowing the individual to take out more money than the properties were actually worth. So this means a lot of things. They are committing mortgage fraud to get better terms. It seems like that not all lenders have the same guidelines, because here's the thing, guys, there are guidelines that allow you, if you're owner of the LLC and the LLC is on title, right? And the guidelines state that you have a cash out refi in 180 days or anything like that. Is that technically mortgage fraud? Not if the guidelines allow it, but not every lender has those guidelines. And then the big catch here is the appraised value for the properties in refinance transactions are overestimated, right? If this is, a lot of this could be DSCR loans, and there's a lot of coaches, YouTube channels, Facebook groups out there. A lot of people say, hey, my property makes 150 grand a year. It should easily be worth 1.2, right? Because they want to use what's called income approach. Guys, I don't know one single true DSCR lender that does income approach. The only income approach I've seen is multifamily with private loans, private equity firms, and commercial. So when you're buying, if it's a short-term rental, and you put 200 grand into the property with furniture, the pool, and all that stuff, it doesn't bring your value up 200 grand because you have better income. It doesn't. I know a lot of people out there get that wrong. But it looks like the red flags Fannie came is if there's a deed transfer 60 to 100 days, you should check. LLCs acting both as the buyer and seller on the deed transfers. Okay? What lender has ever allowed the LLC to buy it from the LLC? That doesn't make sense. They say multiple leases utilized at origination to help qualify the borrowers. Okay, leases are used, right? And you verify that with guidelines with deposits. There you go. 2 to 4 single-family properties. Oh, here you go. Subject transactions pays off private hard money loans. The reason they bring this up is because people are adding liens after application, and you're good to go, right? Not every lender has those guidelines. Here we have the guideline that technically you can add a lien prior to closing. That's a private money loan that's used to rehab the property, and it's considered a rate term transaction. It seems like here they were doing private hard money loans just to pay themselves. Let's see. Dates don't align with the documentation. Holder of the lien. Oh, I didn't even see this one before. This is big. So the holder of the existing lien was also holding ownership in the lender. So part of this, whether it's the lien, right, the private money, or has affiliation with the borrower. So there's a lot of relationship there. Mortgages being paid off cannot be validated with public records. So payoffs, right? They can't validate that with public records because it's unsecured. It's a type of land contract, unsecured private note, all this stuff. You have to make sure that your guidelines that the loans are being sold to allow for that. So like here at the lender, do we allow unsecured liens be paid off as a rate term refi? Because that's what they were doing. No, right? I don't know any DSCR lender that does that. So if there's a debt, we recently had this come up with a builder, and I got in an argument with people, but a lien was put on the property, supposedly, but never recorded, and there was no lien on it. If there was a lien, right, then the construction loan never would have been done, because the construction loan doesn't want that. So what we had to do in one situation, it was a private note from an investor, right? And this is key for all you private money lender people out there and everything. How you record your liens and all that stuff can affect the outcome. This was to do it as a rate term refi, which is better interest rate, better terms, better guidelines, right? It's better than a cash out. So if you have a private note being added to a lien, so it could be paid off, that's perfectly legal. However, it's how you structure it too, to do a rate term. Because if it's just like most private money's like, hey, you have a 15% due at the time of closing or whatever, that's a paid in kind. That means it's a cash out. It cannot be treated as a rate term. Most people's guidelines, Fannie, Freddie, a lot of people say if it's paid in kind lending, right, type of loan, it's a true cash out. It has nothing, you can't do rate term at all. So with that said, were these people doing a unsecured private note and then they quickly add it at title and it never was recorded? Possibly. And if you pay that off, one, it was never recorded, so that's automatically a cash out in almost every guideline I've ever read. Two, it was probably paid in kind, which means it's also a cash out. So it sounds like they were trying to do rate term to sneak it through. I've done loans like this, but I've always followed it to the letter. And the letter says this: if it's a lien secured to the home, we just need it secured before final underwriting. If it's used for rehab money or rehab the home and you secure it before we go in for clear to close, we can use that as a rate term refi. Right? Perfect. Done those. Here's where I got tricked up recently. The private note that was being used was one that I personally, not me on this deal, but on other deals, I'm willing to loan out money like this, where it's like, hey, I'll give you 50 grand, you give me 15% back when you cash out, sell, whatever. that is called a paid-in-kind loan. So this is where I messed up. I just missed that completely, and so we couldn't treat it as a rate term. We had to treat it as a cash out, right? Because it's paid in kind, right? It's just like a cross-collateral loan or a bridge loan on multiple properties. Those are always going to be treated as a cash out. Very rarely will you ever get someone to treat it as a rate term, even if you don't get any cash out. So, interesting. Mortgage, so on one of those deals that we caught the builder doing this, second lien supposedly, we didn't know about, title didn't know about. Actually, title did first tell us about it. We asked them about it, and we asked the builder, and they said, oh, there's no lien on it. So title removed it. Then at the end, they wanted to be paid. And then sure enough, like, hey, we need this in order for it to be a rate term refi. We need you to go record this, because the documentation, the contract did show a while ago, they just never recorded it, right? So legally, with our guidelines, they could go record it, and then we put it in as part of the rate term refi or the right? Because cash out, who cares, right? Because we're giving the customer a cash. But as a rate term, we needed that. But they didn't want to pay the taxes. They didn't want to go to the county, record it. It takes 3 or 4 days, and then pay the transfer tax just to do it. So they didn't do it. They just did a true cash out, right? Because it didn't show a lien against the property. Now, however, they worked things out on their end. They took the cash and paid it off. That's fine. But you just got to be careful and follow the guidelines. So everyone out there, guys, I don't care who you are, whether you're a broker, realtor, investor, or primary buyer, borrower, whoever, everyone out there can commit fraud. This is big because the big scheme behind this is that they were sending a code through the appraisal management group, like 444, I think it was, that just said, hey, my appraisers I like in this area, if you see someone putting through a quote for 444, that's us, right? Our LLCs, our people, please inflate the numbers to make this work. We need it to be what we put in and get us better income so we can qualify this way, right? That's appraisal fraud. There's so many levels of fraud here. I guarantee you the appraiser, everyone who owns the LLC, because this the lender, the broker, which said here was big part of the scheme, and everyone involved, title company as well. I don't know how title could say, hey, there's a lien against the house, and it was never recorded, right? And they said it's how many transactions was it? Hold on. Where is it? It was on here somewhere, guys. I'm sorry. So according to this, there was nearly 200 borrowers and entities, LLCs, in this scheme. So there's a lot of people involved. There was over, the first lender put out a list that they're responsible for that's having an issue, right? The servicer, the investor, 31 appraisers and 59 entities have been excluded. And then while another announced ineligibility for loans, this is the number you really want. Ineligibility for loans involving 49 appraisers and nearly 200 borrowers and entities. So, guys, that's huge. That's a big national scheme. I mean, I say national because it's going to affect everyone, right? When servicers get involved and investigate, it puts a halt on everything. Most lenders right now can't touch those states, especially those cities. And then all other states, you're going to have servicers start auditing more. You're going to have servicers start checking their portfolio, because if it's being done in this area, who's not to say it's being done in Nashville, Tennessee? Who's to say it's not being done in California, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, right? So guys, be careful. It's very interesting that out of all the videos I've seen out there, right, no one's talking about the mortgage fraud scheme. They all want to try to get views, but this is a story that's out there no one's talking about. If you know me, I've talked to you probably about it because I love geeking out on this stuff. But guys, be careful. Make sure what you're doing lines up with guidelines. Again, if you're an investor and you have multiple people on an LLC that owns a property, you can absolutely transfer it to another LLC or an individual and do it as a rate term refinance. That's completely kosher. Where it's not kosher is where you add like a paid-in-kind loan, right? And you try to do that as a rate term when every guideline I've ever seen says paid-in-kind. Or where you add a loan to title to but it's not actually a lien against the property. That was never secured, and to do a rate term, it's got to be either secured or a buyout usually, or a divorce payout and stuff like that. So guys, make sure when you work with the lender, they're showing you the guidelines or telling you the guidelines, because yes, you can win massively knowing guidelines and knowing the system and how to do it, but a lot of people cheat the system without knowing what they're doing, and they get burnt like this. So until next time, it's your boy Nathan here with One with Nathan. Have a good one.